Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Tuesday morning to you all. I hope you guys are doing well out there this morning and having a fantastic start to your Tuesday and a great week out there so far. Here to give you the updated information on what's going to happen weather-wise between now and the next 24 hours. We'll even extend a little bit into our Wednesday, even Thursday morning for certain areas of the country. We'll talk about flooding. We'll talk about a severe weather risk in areas of like Texas. And then we'll give you some updated information on this winter weather that's falling out there right now. And we'll really begin to take over sections of the Northeast as we get into the next 12 to 24 hours. So we'll break it all down for you folks. At the very end of the video, we will discuss the flooding threat that will extend into our Wednesday and Thursday. But I got very detailed in last night's video if you're interested and didn't watch it yet. And if you're, kind of interested in what's coming up in the long range, I really discuss sort of the question marks. It's a very tricky pattern coming up, especially as we get into next week. There could be some wild cards thrown into the pattern. It's a tricky setup coming up. So I think some interesting times are coming up. A lot of people in the Southeast, the Carolinas, Georgia, kind of bummed because they think that we're going to be kind of hoodooed because winter weather has already happened kind of the west of the Appalachian Mountains and portions of like Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, even Louisiana, Texas. Certainly Tennessee. I've already seen winter weather, and us here in the Carolinas, even sections of Virginia, Georgia, are just kind of left scratching our heads thinking, are we going to get any kind of winter weather? Now, I know not everybody's winter weather fans. I know I am. Folks, winter is not over. We're already seeing some changes in the long range that are going to eventually work itself into the mid-range. I really do think it will. So we'll continue to fine-tune that here in the coming days. I don't want to talk it to death. We need to see how the models kind of hash it out and figure it out. But we will continue just to kind of give you update information over the next several days. And hopefully by this weekend, we have an idea of what's coming up. So if you folks have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Like the video if you like it. And if anybody has anything that I can pray about or pray over, as always, please put it in the comments below. Thankfully, I am caught up with everything. I feel like I'm ahead of the ball game. I'm kind of grateful things have slowed down, even though when the weather world slows down, the growth of the channel slows down. But, I'm totally fine with that. We're just kind of cruising right along. I feel like I've been able to catch my breath, so that's good. So let me catch my breath now. So let's get rocking and rolling. So we got a lot of moisture out there across the country. We got winter weather flying around out here in like lower Michigan, sections of Wisconsin seeing a little bit of winter weather. And then this is beginning to work into like northern PA, New York State, and eventually like even sections of southern New England. Certainly New England will see a little bit of winter weather. This isn't a significant event by any means, but it will have some accumulating snow and maybe a little bit of ice. There is some rain showing up in sections of like North Carolina, South Carolina, even shows some pink in North Carolina, but that's not really hitting the ground. But some of these showers are hitting the ground in Georgia and starting to reach the ground here in South Carolina. We just got a little bit of Virga on radar. Heavy rain moving across the Mississippi River in the Delta region down here. And we've actually had some severe weather down here in central Texas. This severe thunderstorm warning, I believe, is probably expired. Not quite sure. But we have already had some severe weather this morning. Just a little bit of basically ingredients are there to support, a marginal severe weather threat today in southeastern and eastern Texas. And we'll actually talk about that. So a little bit of moisture still flying around the Pacific Northwest, but it's a lot quieter out here in California this morning after we got a lot of flooding around the San Diego area yesterday. A lot more rain than even I expected. We really did. I think we got a few inches of rain, which San Diego isn't, I wouldn't say built to handle that, but they typically don't see that kind of rain in just a 24-hour period. So this is what's going on out there. We're going to show you the good old-fashioned water vapor loop. Haven't done this in several weeks. For my people who's been tuning in for a while, know that I used to show this almost every day, and I think I'll get back to showing it a little bit more. But I want to show you kind of what's driving this pattern. If you see the flow like this, and then you kind of see a flow like that. So there's a high pressure over here, and this high pressure, and I'm just going to draw an H. I'm not exactly sure if this is exactly where this high pressure is anchored, but the flow is kind of going like this. Now, you can hardly see it, but you can see how this really isn't clouds, but I'm sure it is clouds because you do have moisture falling. But this is really just moisture in the atmosphere. The wider you see the colors on the screen, the more moisture in the atmosphere. So this is actually surging in out the Gulf. At the same time, you have like this upper level low feature kind of right into here. And the flow around that is going like this. A pretty solid mid-level flow is what we call it. So you're getting a pretty decent surge of moisture. And in fact, you go back and look at the radar, there's a lot of heavy rain right over the Mississippi River, surging into this region right now. And with this upper level low, you're going to probably have some ingredients right in here, a little zigzaggy line there, sideways lightning bolt, whatever you want to call it. Some ingredients, because you're going to have a little bit of a low to mid-level jet screeching through this region, and then you're going to get moist air that's getting pulled into this section of Texas. Higher dew points, more humidity, and then a little bit of wind flow aloft to support some severe weather. And that's kind of what's driving this today. All this moisture getting pulled all the way up into here, all the way around this high pressure into the interior section of the Northeast. And the flow really supports what's going on out here pretty well. So I know I haven't showed that in a while, but there it is. Storm Prediction Center, there's that marginal risk. We'll see if this uptrends, but as of now, they're sticking with that marginal risk. This does include some higher populated regions. I mean, San Antonio, Houston, pretty much all of southeastern Texas except extreme southern Texas has a level 1 out of 5 risk of severe weather. And what's driving this is there is a 2% risk of a tornado within 25 miles in a given location today in the green. We haven't spoke much on severe weather lately, but I think this definitely warrants being spoken on here. So there is a risk of tornadoes. I mean, in Houston, it's very low, but it's there. 5% risk of winds, hail, 5% risk of that. Not a big deal in those categories. So we do need to watch out for this today. I think one of the bigger storylines today is a flooding risk. You have a moderate risk now, at least a 40% risk of flash flooding in this red area. Okay, the yellow region is at least a 15% risk of flash flood guidance being met within 25 miles in any given location, point, whatever we want to call it. And this is including eastern Texas, northwestern Louisiana, and then southern and southwestern, especially Arkansas. So flooding is going to be a big deal today. We'll talk about how much rain these areas of the country can see as we get to that portion of the country where there's all those flood watches extending all the way from the heart of Texas all the way into like the southern sections of the Cumberland Plateau, pretty much covering all of northern Alabama and right through the heart of Mississippi, southern Arkansas, and a lot of areas in Louisiana, except maybe extreme southern Louisiana. Then there's all your winter weather advisories stretching from like Kansas all the way almost to Boston and everybody in between in this purple region. So a lot of fog. If you're wondering what all the dark gray color is, that is a lot of fog. And this happens typically when you have a lot of moist air clashing up against a lot of moist, warmer air, you know, riding over the snowpack, kind of clashing against these cooler temperatures at the surface. This typically creates fog in these situations. So let's talk about the southeast first. We do have some rain showers out there in Georgia, a little bit of rain moving into the panhandle of Florida this morning. But I think that this area, Georgia into the Carolinas, Virginia, will stay mostly dry. But you'll notice the increase in clouds today. There will be some shower activity out there, but just not a washout. Could get more of a steadier rain here in the Big Bend, the panhandle of Florida into northern Florida. But, you know, it could get kind of rainy here along the coastal regions of Georgia, South Carolina today. Although maybe even some shower activity all the way into southeast VA. See all those showers in the PD of South Carolina, the Sandhills of North Carolina. A little bit of shower activity possible in Alabama, Georgia. But the main rain begins to move into the picture, which I typically call the southeast from Mississippi. Typically, this entire area is the southeast of me. And then once you get into Louisiana, Arkansas, I typically include that in the south central frame. But as we're getting into our Wednesday morning, we're starting to see some rain, even some thunderstorms starting to move into sections of Mississippi, as you can tell. And, you know, we go on and look at how much rain's expected. A lot of this rain you see in like central to western Mississippi starts to move in overnight tonight. So between now and just Wednesday morning, maybe over an inch of rain in Jackson. Up here to Memphis, you guys could get 1 to 2 inches of rain. But you see the light amounts over the Carolinas, not a whole lot, maybe just enough to get the ground and the pavement wet. I wouldn't expect enough rain to have any runoff or anything. But the big rain is further to the west and starting to move into the picture. We'll talk more on this rain as we get to the south central frame. But we go up here to the northeast. It's quiet for most people this morning, but here comes the precipitation moving in. By the time we get to about midday, looks like we got at least a wintry mix falling in the northern counties of northern PA. Looks like a light, maybe moderate snow falling across southern sections, the southern tier of New York, the Finger Lakes region. We're just getting good old rain here in northern New Jersey and maybe north of New York City. A little bit. We got to watch this band. Sometimes these little, we call them frontogenesis band, just the initial surge of moisture can overproduce. So I'd watch this area about lunchtime, 1 p.m. today. This is the time frame we're at right here. This is in Eastern time, so 1 p.m. I'd watch this a little bit later today. We get to about 4 or 5 p.m. You know, it starts to let up a little bit of snow trying to get into the Berkshires. It's snowing in the Tug Hill Plateau, southern sections of the Adirondacks. It's like snow starting to move into Buffalo. And then we get into later this evening. We'll take it all the way to about 11 p.m. It's still too warm for any kind of snow in New York City. Maybe Scranton, you're starting to mix in with some snow. Binghamton, it looks like it's snowing all across the interior New York State region. You know, the valley regions looks like it's snowing, the Adirondacks, the Catskills, maybe a little snow in the Poconos, Berkshires, snow starting to move into southern Vermont, southern New Hampshire, and it's snowing and all the way down into northern Connecticut, northern Rhode Island. And you keep this going and you go all the way to about, I mean, this is the wee hours of the morning tomorrow morning, 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning. It looks like it's getting too warm for snow here in western sections of New York. And this is because, you know, you got a high pressure that's not really anchored in the area that very well. And you just got warmer air. The ridge is starting to bulge, kind of budge into this area. It's where you, not only do you have warm air aloft, you have warm air at the surface starting to mix in, but you're still cold enough. I mean, it's snowing pretty early tomorrow morning in Boston. And you kind of keep this going, still snowing up here in northern New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, even getting up to Maine. And then we start to get fully into tomorrow, and then a lot more warm air works in. And then we start to get some ice up here in Quebec and areas of Ontario. This could be a nasty icing event up there as the cold air is going to hang on a little bit longer. But you see all that winter weather up here in Canada. This could be certainly a solid icing event with the low down here and just still some cold air anchored. But look at this, just rain. I mean, rain all the way up into Vermont and New Hampshire in the heart of winter. So maybe a little bit of ice. We'll talk more about this little system for Maine here in the next video. But between now and the next 48 hours, Thursday morning, solid ice amounts showing up in northern PA. I mean, somebody could squeeze in a 1/4 inch of ice somewhere. I think State College could see, you know, maybe a glaze of ice. I mean, maybe even a little bit of ice in northern New Jersey. New York City, I don't expect any winter weather from this. I don't expect it. Maybe some flakes mixing in, but maybe a glaze of ice up here in the Adirondacks. You get up to the Canadian border here, could get 1/10 to 2/10 of an inch of ice. But I mean, you know, you look at snow in this area, right? You add a little bit of ice with this little bit of snow, and I mean, it could cause some issues. But this is going to be a very warm system. I don't think it's going to be falling in temperatures in like the teens or anything like that. But you see, just in general, 1 to 3 inch per mount, 1 to 3 inch snow amounts across this entire area between now and the next 24 hours. So, you know, Buffalo, maybe an inch or two. Binghamton, an inch or two of snow. That's the common thing. No point in mentioning every single area. You kind of see that almost everybody in New York except NYC, New York City, sees a little bit of accumulating snow from this. And then we make it a little bit further east. And there it is, Vermont, New Hampshire. I mean, but, you know, look at Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. Pretty much everybody in southern New England gets a little bit of accumulating snow. The Berkshires, maybe a little bit more. And these elevated regions are definitely more favored, more of these marginal setups. So the hills of like central Mass, you know, there's some higher terrains in northern Connecticut. You guys could be a little bit favored, more favored for maybe another inch or two compared to everybody else. Now, it looks like Boston, they're saying that maybe the ocean might affect you guys. It looks like there's a sharp cutoff around the city, but I could see Boston getting an inch, inch and a half of snow from this. So not a whole lot, a little bit of icing is possible from this also. Maybe a solid glaze of ice up here in the Green and White Mountains of Vermont and New Hampshire. So we'll see what happens there. But talking about Maine, I don't want to leave you folks out. A little bit of a glaze of ice through about Thursday morning, but I really think that you get a solid glaze as you start to get into about Thursday and Friday morning. And there's a couple 1/100ths of an inch of ice. Not a big deal. And we talk about snow up here, you know, not a lot, maybe an inch. 2 inches is the common thing, but most people will just get a dusting. Don't want to leave my folks up here in Maine hanging up here. So south central U.S., we're already dealing with some storms and a lot of convection showers, heavy rain out there this morning. We will continue as we get to about midday. This is around 1 to 2 p.m. Look at all these storms up here around the Dallas-Fort Worth area. This down here in Texas will be the area we need to watch out for. This is where you're going to have that flow aloft, the wind flow aloft, that's favorable for definitely thunderstorms. But what about severe weather? I think you will have some marginal ingredients, even as far as kinematics, for some severe weather. But you're definitely going to have some moist air kind of getting into this region that's going to support some severe weather, that's for sure. But, I kind of want to show you the broad look at this just because I want to see everybody here. But, you're going to get a solid push of rain back into Oklahoma today, Arkansas later this afternoon. You might get a little break sometime this morning. But then here comes the heavy rain again into Arkansas. And look at these storms down here. Even some heavy rain down here in southwest Texas, some rain around Amarillo Point south. And we keep getting into the overnight hours. And, yeah, these storms look, I'm not going to lie, they look kind of nasty down here in southwest Louisiana. They even kind of have that kidney bean look. We'll get a little bit closer at this here in a second. And then we just need to watch, especially the Texas coastline later tonight into tomorrow morning. You got these storms that are just kind of riding over the same areas. We got to watch Houston for some flooding. A little bit closer look at how this could evolve today. And here it is. There's a kind of consolidated area of showers and storms up here in central Texas, north Texas. But it's as we get into the afternoon hours, you got to watch all these little storms kind of at the south end of all this other convection right up here. And as we are starting to get into this evening, it's around 6 p.m., we got to watch any storms that develop down into here. You got the thermodynamics and you got the kinematics to support. I also want to watch some heavy wet snow with these showers and heavy rain down here in southwest Texas. You could have a little bit of cold air, enough kind of these hills out here in southwest Texas and mountains even, for a little bit of wet snow. I do want to watch that. Could snow very heavily. But you keep this going, and you just got to watch all these storms. Then look at this. This is around midnight tonight. Look at this other area of heavy rain that begins to develop. And not just, heavy rain, folks. These are storms riding the Texas coastline into Louisiana. And these could produce a lot of heavy rain, guys. This is something we got to watch. They're training over the same areas, producing a lot of rain, and just more rain into eastern and southeastern Texas tomorrow too. So what about that that updraft velocity swath that kind of shows the rotation with these storms? Well, it really starts to get highlighted this afternoon, this evening. It likes this area right in here. But then watch as we get into the overnight hours. This tells me that we do need to be somewhat concerned about a tornado risk overnight tonight into after midnight along the Texas coastline. And you even extend this into Louisiana. If we can find Louisiana, there we go. And of course, I always got to flip this back here and go all the way into Louisiana with this. And yeah, watch out Lake Charles. Even getting into tomorrow morning, midway tomorrow afternoon, this gets all the way into Jackson. So we do want to watch this little area right in here, especially after midnight tonight. And really getting into tomorrow morning, tomorrow afternoon for more so Mississippi. And you look at the ingredients on what's driving this, and we'll start off this morning. Man, it always does that. Pivotal weather is so, you just got to baby it. But you keep this going, and there it is. You see, this is this afternoon. This is the low-level flow. So you got a 30, 40 knot low-level jet in response to this upper-level low back here with a surface low associated with it. And you definitely have enough flow aloft that supports, one, the lift for thunderstorms, and two, a little bit of spin in the atmosphere with a stout southerly flow. And yeah, this is why you do have that tornado threat right in here. That's a solid 30 to 40 knot mid-level jet, and that will absolutely get the job done. Now, this starts to increase as you get into the evening hours, and that's why these storms start to go more so linear up here. But definitely some winds picking up in response. These storms, even all the way up into Arkansas, could produce some gusty winds because of this 50 to 60 knot low-level jet. And you look at these dew points in these regions. Okay, this is also an ingredient for severe weather, these moist levels and what we call thermodynamics. And you're definitely in no shortage of moist air. Dew points well into the 60s, even pushing 70 in certain areas this afternoon. It'll feel humid down here in Texas. Not as bad up here, but even some dew points creeping into the mid-50s all the way up into, Little Rock. The entire state of Louisiana has dew points well into the 60s. So tons of moist air to really feed into these storms. Very moist environment. Something more so you'll see deeper in the spring. So be careful down there today. Really into tonight. But we're talking about what's going on today in the north-central U.S. And I think as we move in time, we'll start to see a little bit of snow in Milwaukee, a little bit of a wintry mix also, some freezing rain is possible. Snow falling and wintry mix all the way back here in central sections of Iowa. Snow falling in kind of the Davenport region, the Quad Cities area. This will continue, snow falling in central sections of Michigan. But once you get in the kind of the southern sections of lower Michigan, it's just going to be rain, I think. But, this will continue through this afternoon. This will begin to pull out. I think any kind of snow or wintry mix in like Milwaukee will taper off, or in the southern half of Wisconsin will taper off a little bit later this afternoon, this evening. Same thing with Michigan this evening. We'll move into Canada, and then we'll pretty much be done with it. And then another round of moisture moves north, but by then it's a lot warmer. Still can deal with a little bit of freezing rain, waking up tomorrow morning in areas of extreme northern Illinois, sections of Iowa. But this is going to be much warmer, and I don't think this is going to be a huge event by any means. But snow between now and tomorrow evening. I mean, southern Wisconsin could get an inch or two of snow. Maybe Janesville, Milwaukee, up to Green Bay. I don't expect much from this. Maybe a dusting, but this will really fall like this morning into this afternoon, and then we get into Michigan. I think the closer you are to Lake Huron, especially tucked into this area right here, you could get a few to maybe several inches of really wet snow in this area. But it's definitely not a huge event by Michigan standards, that's for sure. Out west, a lot of moisture out in the Pacific Northwest spinning around because of this upper level low. But we do have some rounds of precipitation moving across the Rockies, the Pacific Northwest. But not a big deal. Today we'll kind of take a break from all the active weather, but we will not take a break in Phoenix and New Mexico. Rounds of rain will be spinning around, and then our next system will move in later tonight for the Pacific Northwest and eventually begin to affect Northern California. And here, this isn't unusual at all. We're just getting rounds and rounds of storms. I'm expecting a very, very stormy pattern, maybe an active pattern to really set up here in the next several days out west. We'll talk more on that. We briefly spoke on it in last night's video, but I do think some active times are ahead, as you guys are going to get a trough overhead that really pumps in a lot of moisture. But getting into tomorrow morning, we're going to be waking up to another soaker in these lower elevations and heavy snow in these higher elevations like the Cascades, Olympic Mountains, and the western sections of the Rockies. But we'll finally get rid of this down here for the most part for the Pacific Northwest. But rainfall between now and the next 24 hours, it's going to add up down here in the southwest. A little bit of rain is possible, but this will really begin to add up here along the west coast up here, more so getting into our Wednesday and Thursday. But looking at the southwest, these areas right here don't get this much rain often. I mean, it's not rare by any means, but certainly some areas will get over an inch, 2 inches of rain in these sections of southern Arizona. It's already rainy out there right now, so you will continue to see some wet times, maybe a little bit more rain thrown back into Las Vegas. But San Diego, you could get some showers, but I think for the most part, the damage has been done. I'm hearing about, I think there's a river called the San Diego River that was just flooding like crazy yesterday. I retweeted some information, but you guys definitely got some big-time flooding. So I hope you guys are recovering well out there. Ron, you'll have to give me some updated information on the comments on that. I know that you're a loyal viewer from the San Diego region, so I appreciate you. But the temperatures out east and the central U.S., it's warming up across the south. You're going to get, you probably already started losing some snowpack up here in, the areas that it felt like it snowed about 2 years ago. But, man, it will melt like crazy today. It probably was melting all night last night because I don't think a lot of these areas got below freezing. But, places like northern Georgia, the upstate of South Carolina, areas of North Carolina is going to struggle with something that we call a cold air damming event. And I feel like we're going to be talking a lot more about this here in the coming weeks. Just a hunch. But areas of the deep south, 60s, but that cold air damming area right here where cold air gets trapped east of the Appalachian Mountains, you guys will struggle to get out the 40s and 50s today. A little bit of cooler air kind of digging down into Texas, but, you get it down to Houston, it's going to be in the 70s, and it's going to be moist. Just well above average for everybody you see on this map, maybe except extreme northern Maine. Everybody's above average. Everybody's thawing out. Your snowpack is, taking a hit. But it's still just cold enough up here in the Northeast still with above average temperatures for winter weather. Pretty much above average out west too. I mean, the only areas that are below average is where you're seeing rain today. But you're getting well into the 50s all the way into Wyoming. Even western sections of the Dakotas, of really South Dakota, western Nebraska. You're starting to get well into the 50s. So, yeah. The general pattern coming up, we'll start it tomorrow morning, is if we'll just take a look at the GFS. Look at all this rain that continues to push in. We're getting to Wednesday afternoon. You see all the rain that just continues to funnel in almost out the Gulf. We get into Thursday morning, still tons of rain across the eastern U.S. We get into Friday. This begins to shift somewhat east as high pressure kind of departs to the east. A lot of rain. You got to get way up in higher elevation and just really far north to see any winter weather up in the northeast. And then even more rain into our Friday, into our Saturday. And then we got to watch this system. This system could throw something different into the forecast as we get to the later half of the weekend into early next week. And we just got to watch. This could be more of a significant storm system in general. Could throw a winter storm for the interior northeast, and could throw some back-end snow all the way into the Ohio Valley, into the southern Alps region. This is a storm that we need to watch. We'll continue to figure that one out. This is kind of close to us. Enough cold air might crash down to where you guys even get winter weather along the I-95 corridor. So that's something we need to watch. And then after that, when we get to next week, it gets weird. There's some weird stuff flying around, and we got to figure it out. We do. You know, I'll continue to extend this run just because I got a little bit of extra time this morning. But, you know, you get into the last 1 or 2 days of January, we got this trough that's kind of digging down only really over the eastern U.S. But we got energy kind of rounding the flank of this trough, diving down, enough cold air. We got this solid snow event that dives down to the Appalachian Mountains. And then enough cold air comes down, and all of a sudden, next Wednesday, not a forecast, last day of January, we're getting snow all the way down to Charlotte, the Piedmont of North Carolina, even snow all the way down to the upstate of South Carolina. Okay, and then that heads off. What happens? Well, you know, if you watched last night's video, I discussed an early February quick warm-up, but it could be affected heavily by some cold air damping. But, you know, we kind of go through that energy flying only through the northeast. What happens after that? We're getting past 10 days out, and this is when it even gets extra weird. Here comes a lot of cold air diving down, running of moisture, and then we start to see chances of winter weather. And I'm telling you, I really think sometime between the 5th and the 10th of February, I know that's on out there. We're only, what, the 23rd? I'm really starting to see some kind of cold air damming set up that could support. And I would even say somewhere between like February 2nd to the 10th. Something I think weird's going to happen in that time frame. We'll see what happens. But, you know, talking about the rain between now and Friday morning, you know, it's going to be a lot of it. As you can tell, the higher totals are down here in the deep south. But, I mean, even several inches of rain may be extending all the way into Tennessee and just a washout. And then this begins to really take over the Carolinas, too, as we start to move deeper into our weekend. And sure enough, you know, you look at the excessive rainfall outlook for day 2, which is for tomorrow. You got the moderate risk, which is that 40% risk of flash flooding, and then the 15% risk in the yellow surrounding it. And, I mean, even as you get into day 3 for our Thursday, as of now, just a slight risk. But, you know, I could see this increasing. So that's all I got. Thank y'all for tuning in. God bless all y'all, and have yourselves a great Tuesday.